was very hard on my family. My dad decided he was tired of being a parent and gave my mom 2 years to get a job and get out of the house, unbeknownst to me and my youngest sister, of course. My brother left the house as soon as he turned 18, and he was always getting drunk or high, or having relations with certain seedy women. My older sister was caught up in her own drama and had no kind words to offer her younger siblings. So I suppose it's no surprise that my little sister and I had paranormal experiences there. First, allow me to explain the layout of the Vernon house. The front door opened to a small foyer, then the dining room and kitchen, which are connected. The hallway to our bedrooms was to the left, while the kitchen was to the right. Standing in the foyer, you could almost see the entire house, including the huge family room down a couple of stairs connected to the dining room. Now, before I begin, I'd like to explain that I had a problem with sleepwalking as a child. I would go to sleep in my bedroom, then wake up in the living room, kitchen, etc. Sometimes, I even interacted with everyone who was still awake while I was in these states. My first encounter with the entity seemed like just another horrible nightmare. In the dream, I walked down the hallway from my bedroom into the living room. I was wearing the exact pajamas I had gone to sleep in, and the house was exactly the same as we'd left it at bedtime. For one reason or another, I felt the urge to look into the kitchen. There he was. The static man appeared in the doorway between the dining room and kitchen. He was tall, barely touching the ceiling, and he appeared robed in black. Instead of a head upon his shoulders, there was this great ball of static. The sound buzzed constantly. I stood there, frozen with fear, staring up at the static man. After perhaps a couple seconds, he reached out his long, dark arm towards me. Then he seemed to kind of float, closer and closer. The buzzing got so loud that it hurt my ears. I remember closing my eyes, screams stuck in my throat, and then I woke up on the couch in the dining room, facing the kitchen. I told my parents about the dream, but they weren't overly concerned about it. No, for a while, I just brushed off the dream. But I wasn't the only one affected by the static man. Apparently, my little sister, Catherine, was woken up one night. When she opened her eyes, the static man was standing between our beds. He seemed to be looking at her. Catherine, despite her fear, got angry with the man. "Get out of here! God will be angry if you don't leave us alone." Then, in a flash of bright light, the static man was gone. Catherine settled herself back into bed and slept peacefully the rest of the night. It should be mentioned that Kat would hear and see things in the Vernon house. Shadows would play in her peripheral vision, and voices would call our names. One time, when we were playing in the backyard, she looked into the alley behind our gate and saw these kids standing a ways away. They called to her, promising her a good time. She ran into the house and didn't tell me why until years later. For many years after Kat's bravery, I didn't have any encounters with the static man. My mom moved us to Wichita Falls, where she finished her degree in nursing. Dad moved to Albin. We started going to a Catholic school. My sleepwalking stopped completely, and for the first time in years, I was able to sleep peacefully. everything, for a while, seemed great. A couple years later, we moved in with my dad. My mom was trying to save their marriage. A few months after settling into the house, the static man appeared again. I woke up in a cold sweat. The man was standing beside my bed, leaning over me. All of a sudden, I was tossed a few inches straight up from the surface of my bed. I would later try to recreate this movement on my own. I couldn't get off the surface of the bed from my position. Then, something pinned me down by my arms and legs. I felt hands wrap around my neck and start choking me. Trying to fight off this attack, I desperately looked around, hoping Kat had been awoken. She hadn't, of course, but I did notice that where I felt fingers grabbing my limbs, there were deep depressions in my flesh. After perhaps a minute or so, I was released, and the static man disappeared as quickly as he'd come. For the rest of the night, I lay there, wide awake, shaking and gasping. From then on, every night, for about a year, I was disturbed in the same way. I was completely drained of energy. My grades fell abruptly, and I violently lashed out at my family. For instance, I actually tried to suffocate my little sister with a pillow. Then I started biting, hitting, and cutting myself just to feel something. I'd even tried to kill myself. My mom, sister, and I moved into our current apartment after 2 years of darkness in my dad's home. The static man continued to torment me. I tried to talk to my mom about it, but she kept telling me that it was just a dream and that it was a side effect of my new antidepressant. If there was something wrong in this house, I'd know about it. I have experiences with these things, remember? She said things like this, even when I kept with her, and the entire bed shook as the man attacked. Caroline, if you keep shaking the bed, I'm kicking you back to your room. One night, I just laid in my bed crying, waiting for the static man to appear. I pleaded to God for just one night of peace. Please, God, please, God, please. I was shaking from fear and exhaustion. I suddenly felt a wave of peace wash over me. I stopped crying and closed my eyes. When the static man jolted me out of bed, I wasn't afraid. It didn't touch me, didn't buzz. It was the first night in a long time I was able to get a good sleep. Thank you, Jesus, I remember thinking before I drifted off to sleep. Ever since then, the static man has only visited me once every few weeks. I'm not afraid of going to bed anymore, and he hasn't been able to touch me lately. I believe either his power is weakening or I'm getting stronger, somehow. Although, I know I'll probably never be rid of this entity. I know he won't be able to hurt me like he was able to beforehand. As to what exactly the static man is, I have no idea. I don't believe he's a human spirit, and he most certainly doesn't resemble any of the nature spirits I've encountered. I don't believe he's a manifestation caused by my medication or even stress, as he appears despite what's going on in my life, and despite whether or not I take my meds. I've tried, and continue to try, to research our old house, but all attempts have proved fruitless. I do know that 2 boys, one of whom lived in the house after we moved, committed suicide for mysterious reasons. Perhaps they're connected, perhaps not. I don't think I'll ever know. Whatever the static man is, I'll continue to fight him, be it through meditation and prayer, or other means if things escalate again. Thank you for reading my incredibly long story. Comments, suggestions are all welcome, as usual. Final Goodbye verse Static in the Air. Users, my story takes place in church. It was my grandmother's funeral, and we were all in our Orthodox church, grieving while the ceremony took place, as you do. Now, my grandfather had passed a year before this. I remember being in tears as the priest spoke about her life and how she is now much happier. As I stared into nothing while looking down at her coffin, it's like my brain had tapped into the world of the supernatural. There he was, my grandfather, standing with one hand on her coffin, looking down at her. I don't know for sure that it was him, because I couldn't see ahead. My abilities are obviously not strong enough, but I just knew it was him. I felt safe and happy. After this experience, we had driven down to the cemetery to say our final goodbyes. As we lowered the coffin into the ground, the sun came out and shone on her coffin. When we could no longer see the coffin, the sun was gone. I was extremely happy. I knew it was my grandparents saying goodbye for the last time. Ever since I had tapped into the supernatural realm of the world, if I concentrate hard enough, I can see what appears to be static in the air. What is this? Am I looking into it too much? Or is this a common thing first-timers see? I often feel eyes on me in my own house, and am scared to be home alone. I hear footsteps and jingling like change, and I know it probably shouldn't scare me, but it does. Can somebody help me understand the static in the air and explain to me a way I can deal with these felt presences? If you had read my story and or commented below, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to help and advice from other users. The White Wings. As this is my first time at publishing a story here, I thought I should start relatively slowly and also explain some background about me. Up until recently, I've been a dancer my entire life and have always felt most serene stood in the wings of a stage. Funny, really, that this story so revolves around wings in every sense. Being a performer, countless hours have been spent on a stage and backstage, wings, tech booths, dressing rooms, etc. Now, though most of my experiences have been personal, I thought I would start with one that was only about me and not something I actually saw myself. It happened during a dress rehearsal for an annual show that I was about to perform in about 2 years ago. I was in a local theater where I am from in South Wales. To set the scene, I was stood alone in the right-hand side wings of the stage. For non-stagey folks, this just means the small space on either side of the theater stage, where you are concealed from the audience. On the opposite side to me were my teacher and her close friend who acted as our stage manager. It is important to note that both of these women are very spiritual and I believe quite in tune with the unexplainable. There is usually very minimal light when you are in the stage area, as was the case now. I was waiting to rehearse a routine and was also acting as an assistant teacher at the time, so was spending 90% of that dress rehearsal right where I was when this event apparently occurred. There were plenty of other people in the auditorium, but none where I was standing at this time. I must stress, there was nothing but black walls and a few tables behind me, and I was very much alone when our stage manager witnessed this event. She claimed to have been watching me from across the stage as we waited to progress, when she saw a large pair of white wings appear behind me, almost wrapping around me. Angel wings? Butterfly wings? What? I was told this all by my teacher shortly afterwards, a woman whom I was very close with and trust immensely. The stage manager had apparently asked my teacher about me as she was seeing it. Has she lost someone close to her recently? My teacher confirmed that, in fact, I had, and the manager proceeded to explain why she was asking. I have always felt a strong feeling with me backstage since this person passed, and always hoped they were there to watch me, as they always had done. One more mentionable detail would be that a while later that day, while the show was in full swing, the same stage manager said I had walked past her in the wings to go backstage, and a huge gust of wind seemed to sweep after me. This stage has no natural drafts, no windows, doors, etc. that could produce winds, and it is always boiling when you're up there. You'd be grateful for a breeze. So again, strange. I have always wondered about this event and hope that it means my loved one was with me. If anyone could confirm this or explain about any theories of seeing wings, I would be so grateful. Thank you so much for reading. At the end of the hall. Anyone who works in the medical field knows the wise tales, such as opening windows when a patient passes, or they come in threes. Given my background with my house, I tend to shrug things off my shoulders and ignore little incidents, telling myself I'm seeing things. On this particular night at work, it was just two aides, one med tech, and myself, the nurse, on the back halls. Now, you would think that the newly built wing would not have any ghosts contained in that area, but we were proven wrong. Around 1930, I was beginning my med pass. As I went to each door, I made sure to keep my card against the wall, so everyone can get through and to see out of my peripherals if anyone needed me. I go into 228 with their medicine, come out, throw away my gloves, and prepare to start pulling meds to the next patient, when I see someone standing in the doorway at the end of the hall. I pause, turn to see if someone needed my help, but no one was there. I continued to pass my medicine, coming out each room, closing the doors behind me. Again, out of the corner of my eye, I see someone standing at the end of the hall, in a doorway. I turn to check, and no one was there. At this time, I only had 3 more rooms left. Inching my way closer to the spot, I kept seeing something. When I get to the last room, I go in, do my routine, come out to my cart, and notice the room I was just previously in. Door is open. Now, knowing the history of the patient and knowing I was the only person down the hall, it kind of took me by surprise. But I didn't react. I just simply closed the door. I go to my last room, and again, when I come out, the same door is open. And can you guess which room it was? The exact room I kept seeing someone stand at the end of the hall. So I played nice, left it be, and started wheeling back towards the nurse's station to start my charting. It's about 12:30 now, and all the rooms are asleep. lights turned off in the halls, my teammates sitting in the living space, so I guess you can say it's pretty quiet, which every nurse never wants the word uttered on their shift. Now, where I sit at the station, I can see down 2A and courtyard, which is relatively new. I'm almost finished with my charting when I started hearing footsteps coming from the courtyard. So I quickly glance over to see if my patients are walking the halls. And nope, sure wasn't. I go back to charting when again I hear footsteps, but this time was a little bit more noise with it. We have a few patients who like to wander into other rooms, so I get up, let my workers know what I'm doing if they need me, and headed up the hall. Stopping outside each room, I patiently wait, listening, and then take a few steps to the next, and so on. I inch further towards the end of the hall, to the room I kept seeing someone stand in the doorway. Of course, I'm thinking, awesome, just my luck. As I start raising my arm to turn the light switch, a loud crash came from within the room. I hoofed it down the hall, not looking back. My coworkers looked at me, bug-eyed and saying, "What the f—" As I'm gasping for air, I'm trying to explain what just happened, and of course, they don't want to go check the room. So, we all go, and to our surprise, whole room was cleaned. Nothing on the floor, nothing misplaced, no one and nothing. Want to know the creepy part? A patient had been staying in that exact room for about 2 months and finally was okay to go home a few days prior. That morning of my shift change, we got a phone call saying the patient who used to be in there had fallen in the early AM and had passed away due to severe hemorrhage of the brain.